Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for a preview of the 2022 Australian Open men's semifinal between Rafael Nadal and Matteo Berrettini. In a separate video, I will preview the other semifinal, which I will link in the description and on the top comment. That one between Daniil Medvedev and Stefanos Tsitsipas. Rafa Nadal now 2 wins away from major number 21. No Novak Djokovic on the other side. Matteo Berrettini seeks his second Slam final, still looking for that first major title. Big opportunity in front of both these men. So let's get into it. If you're new to the channel, here's how these work. I will make a case for each player. I will discuss their paths to victory, and at the end, I will reveal my prediction. This is the second meeting between Nadal and Berrettini. The first came in 2019 at the US Open. It was Berrettini's his maiden major semifinal, and it was a straight set win for Rafael Nadal. Berrettini did not have a break point in that entire match, which segues me nicely to the first thing I really want to talk about, which is the dynamic between Rafael Nadal's serve and Matteo Berrettini's return, and how those points are likely to play out, in my opinion. Matteo Berrettini, his backhand return is something that's attacked by a lot of players. You saw Carlos Alcaraz hitting kick serves to Berrettini's backhand and having a lot of success there. We've seen Novak Djokovic target the backhand return. It's a pretty obvious thing to do, especially if you can kick it up high. Now, Nadal doesn't have a kick serve, but he has a slice serve, which obviously does a great job at bringing right-handers, especially on the ad side of the court, outside the singles line to hit uncomfortable backhand returns. Matteo Berrettini's backhand return is not terrible. He usually makes it. I think he gets a lot in play, and he usually hits it cross court. There's just usually not a lot on it. It is not a shot that is going to be offensive. It is not a shot that is going to hurt you, which is obviously a stark contrast to the forehand side, where, especially if you hit a second serve to Berrettini's forehand and miss your spot, or if he sees it coming, you can be in a lot of trouble. Obviously, with Nadal being a lefty, you don't really want to hit that return cross court. You're giving Nadal what he wants, that first ball forehand. So Nadal hits most of his serves to the righty backhand all the time. So let's talk about the ingredients that are required to survive Nadal's first strike tennis. His serve plus his first forehand, and he's so good. Once he has you on the run, he's so good at keeping you on a string with his forehand, never letting the ball get back to his backhand, and sustaining that aggression and keeping you on the ropes. So it's very important that you make a good return so that you don't fall into Rafael Nadal's forehand cage of despair and doom and horribleness. So there's a couple ways you can do that. The first thing is you can hit a backhand return that has to be well timed. So this is more difficult to do, but you can hit it either down the line if you're on the ad side as a righty, so down the line to Nadal's backhand, or if you're on the deuce side, you can hit it inside out, which is a return that I think Andy Murray has hit better than anyone else on a consistent basis, for example. That's one option. You can get it to Nadal's backhand on the return. That's really hard to do, but if you can do it, it's great. The second option is you can hit a return hard enough and deep enough that Nadal may be hitting a forehand, but you've blunted his aggression. You've kept the forehand at bay. He can't be aggressive on that shot because you've achieved enough depth and enough heaviness that you're not allowing Rafa to hit an offensive forehand. The second option is for those who don't have good backhand returns. Let's say, for example, and we might see this in the final, maybe, let's say he's playing Stefanos Tsitsipas. Tsitsipas doesn't have a great backhand return, but he's had decent success against Nadal. That is because Tsitsipas can give Nadal that first forehand that he wants, and has the speed, the defensive skills, and the ability to start that point in a defensive position and dig out of it, to get back to neutral, to turn defense into offense, to make Nadal hit enough extra balls where maybe he gives himself a chance to get neutral. So it's one of two things. Either you have an exceptional backhand return, or you have the exceptional movement and defense to fend off Rafael Nadal's forehand barrage. Matteo Berrettini doesn't have either of those things. He's 0 for 2 there. And as a result, I don't see how he's winning return points. And the most concerning thing about this is that I think the dynamic might look pretty similar on second serve return points. Because you could make an argument for on the first serve, it doesn't really matter as much because Berrettini's going to win a very high percentage of his first serve points too. The way he has this, an incredible first serve and an unbelievable forehand to follow it up. Probably the best first forehand in the world right now. So it's the second serve where the concerning thing is that Berrettini, I think, struggles to do enough with the backhand return on the second serve return to win a good percentage of second serve return points as well as first serve return points. That's a big problem, in my opinion, for Berrettini. Speaking of second serve points, let's talk about Nadal's second serve return. In this tournament, it's ranged from amazing to not good. It really has been up and down. My observation throughout the tournament is that it's much better when he's taking the return early, and it's something that he came into the event practicing. Taking time away from his opponent, shortening up his swing a little bit, and hitting aggressive second serve returns up on the baseline. And I think when he's done that against Adrian Mannarino, against Karen Khachanov, in the first set against Denis Shapovalov, he's been great. The thing is, he hasn't stuck to it. He's moved back a lot in these matches. He's generally been less effective when he has moved back because he hasn't gotten great depth on his return. And even the forehand of Adrian Mannarino, certainly the forehand of Karen Khachanov in the third set, the one Nadal lost. And, Dennis is a different story. But they were able to hurt Rafa in a pretty big way. But when he stood in, he's been really good. I think ultimately when it comes to the Nadal return, this is going to be a match where we're reminded that although Nadal isn't really put up there with the Djokovic's and the Murrays of the world as the greatest returners of this generation, he's really darn close. And I agree that there's a little bit of there's a gap there when it comes to fast court, big serve returning. I would not argue that Nadal is on the same level as those guys. And now I think Medvedev deserves to be in that conversation as well. But I would argue that it's close, very close. And I think it's good enough to maintain a trend that we've seen with Matteo Berrettini, which is that against the elite returners, he struggles. And I think the best illustration of that is if you just look at his record against the top 10 overall, he really hasn't beaten top 10 players all that consistently at all. In the last 52 weeks, his record against the top 10 is 1 win to 8 losses. Against non-top 10 players, he's 43-5. That's a win percentage of about 90%. So Berrettini has really made a living off of not losing to anyone he's not supposed to beat. But against these elite players, I think the main difference is it takes a special player to return Berrettini's serve well enough to actually make a dent in these matches against him. And I just think a few players can. They're usually in the top 10. The best returners are usually in the top 10. And I mean, you can look at the numbers there. Return point, the players at the top of return points won are pretty much the top players. You know, you get some exceptions with guys who aren't quite there because they don't have serves like Diego Schwartzman, but for the most part, that's how it is. And Berrettini struggles against those guys. So the Nadal return is obviously going to be a massive factor against the weapon of Berrettini's serve. And I'm interested to see how he returns the second serve. You know that there's not going to be that much success against the first serve because nobody has that success, but you want to steal a couple of points. And, you know, my gut tells me that Nadal is going to put in a performance that kind of reminds us that he is an elite returner on a hard court, even though he's not held up in the same esteem as some of the other guys who are known as the generational returners. That is what I'm really looking forward to seeing which way that plays out. Now I want to talk about Berrettini's backhand in the rallies. Berrettini usually drives his backhand return, so I didn't really discuss this. But in the rallies, Berrettini will need to drive his backhands. You can't slice against Nadal. Nadal destroys slice. That's for a couple reasons. One, his racket speed is unparalleled, and that just gives him the ability to get, as everybody knows, more RPM on the ball than anyone else and more weight of shot. So he's able to generate off of a ball like a backhand slice, which doesn't have pace. He's able to generate that pace and generate that topspin to hit up on the ball and bring it down in time before it obviously goes long. And he gets amazing weight of shot even off of backhand slice. The second thing is his footwork. If Berrettini slices down the line, Nadal is always going to do a really good job of, first of all, anticipating that shot and starting to move early, but to use his footwork to avoid hitting a backhand on that shot and to try everything he can to make it a forehand. Berrettini also avoided the slice against Carlos Alcaraz. Alcaraz has a lot of similar attributes on the forehand side to Nadal. So I wouldn't say Berrettini completely didn't slice in that match, but he really did stay away from it for the most part, and that was premeditated, and I think that was tactical, and I think it was smart. But we see that if you force Berrettini to drive every backhand, it does lead to more errors. And you know what? A lot of players don't get the errors out of the Berrettini backhand. They go there because it's not the forehand and it's not a terrifying weapon, but it doesn't really get them anywhere because Berrettini can trade the backhand. Berrettini, especially when he's comfortable slicing, he can mix things up and find his forehand and put you in uncomfortable spots. That is part of the reason why a lot of players can't beat him, even though, you know, everybody knows to hit it to the backhand, but that's not good enough against Matteo. Now, getting it to the backhand and taking away one of Berrettini's options, just taking away the slice, making that a losing tactic because of the attributes that Nadal has, now things get more difficult for Matteo. And one of the areas where he always needs to slice because he just doesn't have the necessary skill to not slice is when he's stretched out. He does not have the open stance backhand on the run that Novak Djokovic is famous for, but even fellow big men like Berrettini, some of them are better at it, like a Hubert Hurkacz is really good at it. Karen Khachanov is really good at it. Berrettini is pretty much going to slice when he's on the run on his backhand. He is not very good hitting that open stance backhand. He will try sometimes, you know, so it's not a non-factor, but he generally doesn't get a lot on it. And he doesn't feel all that comfortable executing on it. The last point in favor of Nadal, I just want to highlight kind of what he will likely, you know, what his baseline pattern will likely look like. He wants to go to the backhand one or two times, but then he wants to blast the finish to the forehand side. He'll constantly be he'll be working on getting the short ball from the backhand, waiting, attacking the backhand, waiting for the ball to attack, probably attacking to the forehand. So for Berrettini, what he's going to need to do is to get out of that pattern before Nadal gets the attackable ball on his forehand side. And I don't really know how he's going to do it, but Berrettini knows that's what Nadal is going to do. Berrettini's coaches, including Craig O'Shaughnessy, who we spoke to on 3, who even mentioned this baseline pattern by Nadal. Everybody in the world knows that's exactly what he does, and it's a matter of how good is your backhand? Does your backhand have the ability to get out of that pattern? So I'm curious to see, what does Berrettini do to try to make that happen? And I don't think, in my mind, I can't think of anything he can do. Now his backhand is improved from 2019. His backhand is looking better. But if he's able to actually get out of that pattern and he's able to hit backhands in a way that keeps him protected against Nadal's attack, I will be surprised. And it's not what I would anticipate will happen. Here's some paths to victory for Berrettini. The best way for Berrettini to win is, of course, if he has an untouchable serve performance, which can happen if he serves even better than he usually does, and he always serves well. He's Matteo Berrettini. But, a great serve on this court, it isn't coming back usually. Sometimes on clay, great serves come back. On this court, not really coming back. So in that sense, this match will be played on Berrettini's racket when he's on serve. Maybe Nadal will have return issues. We saw him play against Maxime Cressy. Cressy's got a big serve. Saw him play against Karen Khachanov. Khachanov has a above average serve when it comes to, the power department, and Shapovalov has that as well. But nothing to the level of Matteo Berrettini, so we'll have to see what Nadal's first serve return looks like against Berrettini. It's not like we've never seen Rafa Nadal in his career have issues where his returns are landing too short against big servers on a quick surface. Nadal physicality issues. How will he recover? Now, he's had 2 days, which is huge for him. I think everybody would admit that. There's been a story going around that Nadal lost 9 pounds as a result of his match against Denis Shapovalov. What we don't know, and I know that sounds crazy to people, but what we don't know is how many pounds Nadal usually loses during a match, because he definitely always loses weight. That's how water works. The heaviest thing in our body is the water that we're holding in our body. Actually, I don't know if it's the heaviest, but I know it's a great deal of weight. And when you sweat, you lose weight. So that's just how it works. NASCAR drivers, race car drivers, but especially NASCAR because it's closed cockpit, so it's super hot in there. They lose like 20 pounds every race. When you sweat, you lose weight. So I'm sure Nadal lost, I'm sure 9 pounds is a lot for Nadal, but it's very possible he usually loses 5. So he only lost 100% more than what he usually does. But I wouldn't read too much into that. It's going to be what time is it starting? I'm trying to think. I think Melbourne time, I think it's afternoon. So it's 7:30 my time, which means it is about 3 hours after 11. Yeah, so it's about 3 p.m. 3 p.m. start. So could be lively, hot conditions. I haven't checked the weather, I will admit. The last thing for Berrettini, superior nerve management. Using the serve dominance of this matchup to shrink the margins, which is something that Berrettini often does. If this is going to go to tie breaks, if there's only going to be a few break points on either side throughout the match, well, it will come down to a couple of pressure points. And I wouldn't put it past Matteo Berrettini to actually have better nerve management than Rafa Nadal. We see this dynamic a lot. First of all, I think Berrettini is unbelievably clutch. Nadal has had his moments in the last year and a half where he hasn't been clutch. And there's much more pressure on Rafa right now. Now, he will downplay that. You could argue with that, and maybe I'm wrong, but the whole thing about him coming back from injury and not expecting to be here, of course Rafa's going to say that, but I think he's feeling what everyone else is feeling, which is that this is a big opportunity for him, that this could be 21. So That plus less match play than usual, plus the history of the last year and a half, plus Berrettini and just how damn clutch he is. I could see Berrettini, if he wins, looking back on the match and being like, look, Rafa got passive on the big point. Matteo didn't. Nadal's still learning to trust that hyper-aggressive first strike game, especially. That is everything I want to say about the matchup. Ultimately, I don't think this is a good head-to-head for Berrettini. I think he'd have a much better chance against the other two semifinalists, quite frankly. And I know that is a bold statement in the case of Daniil Medvedev, who is still, I think, the favorite, in the odds, the favorite to win this tournament. And I'm not going to get into it, right? I'm not going to preview a hypothetical Berrettini-Medvedev, but I actually think that would give Berrettini a better chance. Nadal, his leftiness, the skill that he has in getting it to the right-handed backhand, of attacking weak backhands, and the way he attacks players that don't move quite as well, like Matteo Berrettini. I mean, the patterns to me are a nightmare for Matteo. And out of respect for Berrettini and out of acknowledgement of Nadal's kind of somewhat inconsistency, I don't blame him for the Shapovalov match, but at the end of the day, we haven't seen him play a complete match against an opponent of Berrettini's quality. We haven't seen that. So out of respect for that, or acknowledgement of that and respect for Berrettini, my pick is Nadal in 4. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.